Hello everyone and welcome back to the PCGamesN Theatre. This is our fifth panel on day 2 of w.a.s.d. and we were talking about video game PR in the post-pandemic age. And I am very privileged to be joined by a trio of very excellent PR people. It's great to have you on the panel today, and we're just going to go around and if you could introduce yourselves, your job title and the company you do PR for. So.
Cool. I'm Ryan Brown, or perhaps known as Toad's Anime on the interwebs. I'm the head of words at Super Games, which is basically just the head of marketing and PR. And yeah, we're a company that do physical video games for Nintendo Switch, and we recently launched a digital publisher as well, so all over the place.
Hi, I'm Jasmine. I work for Sega Europe, and I work primarily on everything 2 Point, which is on the stand, and you can play it here at w.a.s.d. And I also work on Football Manager and all things Relic, so Company of Heroes 3. And can I just say how great it is to finally be at a physical event? Like, finally, after so long, so it's really nice to be here with everyone.
Great, and I'm Jon Wilcox, and I'm PR and Events Lead at Team 17. So we've got a stack like Jasmine and Ryan. We've got a room here with a stack of really cool games, a couple of public debuts for a couple of our games as well, Marauders and Ship of Fools. So go and check it out if you haven't already done so.
It's the great thing about PR, the hustle never ends. Thanks chaps. So yeah, we're talking about so PR is a very nebulous term. It's very complex. You know, it's not something you can simplify. But to sort of lay the groundwork for how things have changed since the pandemic, I thought we'd start off by if you could just talk about perhaps what the most kind of challenging adaptation you had to make during the kind of past 2 years in terms of how you did your jobs and how you PR'd and marketed your games. So Ryan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, so the main sort of obvious point is that no one was in the office anymore. And especially personally, I joined Super Rare of May of 2020. Really good time to start a new job. And so I literally was remote for, like, I didn't go into the office for like the first 6 months. And so I hadn't really met my team. I didn't really see my team at all. And yeah, that's certainly challenging, especially because that came at a time where not only was I starting like that, but that was new to everyone. That was new to everyone that was working there and everyone in the industry. And so trying to find a way that works, especially in a PR sense, like I find that it's such a communicative-based role that you know, you can do digital meetings and stuff, but certainly while people are finding their footing, that's really difficult to find your way in PR plans and in community-based plans. So yeah, it probably took like a year, to be honest, to like figure out how that sort of clicked and how that worked, and finding my footing at the company. So yeah, very obvious one, but just the remote working at the start, really. That was certainly the most difficult thing during the pandemic.
Yeah, no, it was challenging for all of us, I think. Jasmine, how about you? How did the nature of your job?
Definitely everything you said. Working from home. Personally, I love working from home. But I think a large part of what I do is also events, like being here, for instance, that completely fell away. So we had to find something else that didn't feel like a meeting, because I think the one thing that we tried not to do for the journalist, if we set up an event for our games, a digital event, is how can we make sure it doesn't feel like another Zoom meeting, another Teams meeting? How can we make it a little bit more interesting and engaging and interactive? And I think, yeah, we had a good agency helping us with that, but that was definitely like searching for how can we best coordinate this and make sure that for people like you, it is a good experience, and for the studios we work with as well. That was like quite challenging, and I think the biggest change to go from physical events to immediately everything doing everything online only. So yeah, I think that was like the big one for me.
I'm going to sound utterly boring because I'm going to absolutely agree with both, with everything that both Jasmine and Ryan have said. You know, I think the key challenge for me, for my department, was discovering new ways to reach press in the same way that they were discovering how to work from home. We were doing the same. You're used to having physical preview events. You're used to events like w.a.s.d. or an E3 or a Gamescom. You know, these are big, you know, tentpole events that happen through the course of the year. You hook your key beats around them. You know the world is watching these events through the course of the year, and trying to discover, okay, how does a digital event work for us? is or was a challenge at the start of that, on top of trying to find a way to live through a pandemic, right? You know, it was a challenge, but you know, I think everybody did extraordinarily well on both sides, whether that's press or PR. It was a challenge, but I think the channels that we had available to us really helped us do it. Thank goodness it was 2020, not 2002, because I think then the challenge would have been many orders of magnitude above.
Zoom.
No Zoom, and we'd all have been stuffing press releases into envelopes and probably taking them to the post box, you know, several times a week, and racking up a lot of stamp charges.
Yeah, even from our side, the nature of events was very different for those 2 years. So let's follow up on that thread then. So obviously, as we come out of the worst of the pandemic, obviously there's still kind of waves and stuff rolling through. But if you could give some insight into how your access event strategy is. So for those in the audience who don't know, like things that we talk about, things like preview events, some review events as well, or just generally occasions where the press come together to get hands-on with a game that hasn't been released yet. So if you're happy to share some insights into how your strategy for those has changed coming out of the pandemic in terms of what you liked about the past 2 years, what you're kind of hoping to get back to from the before times, anything like that, Ryan? If you want to
Yeah, sure. So I mean, so obviously, yeah, as you say, like obviously we had press events before, whether it's events like this where we'd see press, or whether it's little tiny gatherings where we show them things, or indeed even at the studio. And obviously for our company, Super Rare, we're a much smaller company, so we don't have perhaps as many opportunities to do lots and lots and lots of those. But we still had to adapt to doing, you know, to digitizing all of that. And that comes with benefits. And we definitely want to carry that forward going on, because I mean, journalists are understandably they're used to being at home now and not being in the office and not going to so many events, and that completely makes sense and is very valid for them. So it's about trying to digitize what we get out of bringing them to events, and you know, that's as obvious as sort of communicating with them and building relationships and networking and giving them builds of games and stuff, and just about how we can make that a fully digital experience without losing some of the sort of charm and connection and relationships and stuff behind it all. Thankfully, things like even channels like Discord, and you know, I basically live on Twitter, so I try and like talk to everyone on Twitter every day. Stuff like that really helps to like continue those relationships with people that we're no longer seeing in person. And yeah, I haven't actually ran like a full-on like digital press event yet, but perhaps that would be a cool thing to explore. But just trying to digitize the whole process, which we have, and I think works, to be honest.
Jasmine, obviously, Humankind launched during the main area of the pandemic, so the press events for that was quite different. So how has that experience informed what you're going to be doing going forward?
Yeah, I personally didn't work on Humankind, but I worked on some other digital events, but I know it's quite similar for Humankind as well. We work with an events agency, NJ Live, who have this great platform where you can customize the experience, so it's like super themed, so it looks like your game, you can have all your art there, and that was like really, really great, because you can obviously do it via Discord or Zoom or something, but you can't really customize it, you can't make it look like it's your game and display all the beautiful key art and have different rooms and different, like, make it look a bit more professional than doing something over Zoom. And again, like I said earlier, you didn't want to make it feel like a Zoom call. So that platform was really great. And yeah, we've done a couple of events that way that hopefully was enjoyable for the journalists to attend. But I think there was also a lot of things to consider, because when you do a physical event like this, you have complete control over the PCs, the build installations. This is maybe all like really, you don't think about that, but you have complete control over the code that you put on the console or on the PC. And now you had to give the journalists the code for a game that's not out yet. We trust you 100%, but from a studio perspective, this is still quite nerve-wracking, right? It's like, oh my God, I'm going to give my game code to someone and I don't know where it goes. So there's like an adjustment period as well for them. Like, look, we know these people, we trust them, and it's going to be fine. We have an events agency, they're going to manage it all, it's going to be fine. So yeah, there was I think, quite a lot of adjustment periods as well, like compared to like a physical event. You need to let go of some of that control, which I sometimes find quite difficult. So yeah, that was for me.
I absolutely agree with that. And the main thing is that when you're showing unreleased games to press, you want to make sure that they have an optimal experience, right? So not only are you talking about the hardware that they're using, totally out of your control. If it's an online game, it's totally reliant on their network connectivity. And, you know, again, thank goodness it's not 20 years ago. You know, a lot of people have super fast broadband and stuff, but not everybody does. So you can't control what the game looks like necessarily on their PCs, because you don't know what they've got running. Same with the network and stuff like that. So that's unnerving sometimes, I suppose. But again, you know, with platforms like Discord to be able to facilitate strong communication like that, then that helps a great deal. It's really nice to be able to go out and start meeting press again. Over the last couple of months, been very fortunate to do that. And I think the main takeaway is I don't take for granted meeting people in person anymore. It is so nice. It's been so nice to be here at Tobacco Dock. It's been so nice to meet press in their offices or in meeting rooms and show off some of the games we've got coming out over the next 12, 18 months or so. And I think the future is going to be sort of a hybrid solution for that.
Let's start back with you, Jon. Next topic, let's talk about resources. And again, there's a lot of like things we've mentioned, things you don't necessarily think about. And there has been, I imagine, implications from like a budget and a cost perspective in terms of what events cost now. You know, the kind of money that goes towards various aspects of a PR campaign. So, can you give some insight into terms of how Team 17 has adjusted or reallocated resources in terms of where you put money in your PR strategy?
I mean, I think it's fair to say that you know, you need to have a multi-pronged attack when it comes to a PR or communications campaign in any case. So you've got to balance out that sort of that earned coverage through relationships with press, with paid digital, and of course social and community as well. So I think when it comes to the budgets, there's been some adjustment, but I think there's a hunger to make sure that now that we can go out to events like w.a.s.d, you know, it's important that we're here. I mean, you know, we're here on stage as being live streamed, so it's a hybrid event as well in some aspects. And I think it's just really key to make sure that whatever events we do, or looking at the campaigns that we do, that, you know, there's good ROI coming back to us.
How about you, Jasmine?
I would say that the amount of budget we had for a particular game didn't change that much on the PR side, because we basically spend our money then on digital events, potentially do a multiple access periods for media. For Company of Heroes 3, we did 2 already. So it's like, yeah, you work. We worked our budgets towards the digital side of things, mainly for PR, what we usually use for physical event. So.
How about you, Ryan?
Yeah, so it's interesting for us because the digital part of our business, the digital publishing label, has come about during COVID. And so, you know, we have, I imagine, comparatively much smaller marketing budgets. So for us, you know, we love events, and we were coming to events before, even just to show off our physical stuff. But for us, it's like we really have to be able to justify that spend. And so we wanted to come to events to see people, show off games, you know, have meetings and let people try the games and stuff like that. Feedback is priceless, frankly. To, you know, even if you QA stuff and stuff, press, it's like it's vital to sort of have that very public feedback. Because if it's not good, they'll tell you. They'll just be like, it's not fun, you should do this, and that's great. Yeah, so for us, we really had to. We ummed and ahed for a while about when was the right time to go back to events. You know, we'd even tried EGX beforehand last October, and it was fairly quiet, but we still got a lot out of it, frankly. And then here, w.a.s.d, like, yeah, I'm feeling that I think from my perspective so far, it's like, it seems like the right thing to do now. Like, go back to physical events. It gives me so much energy. Like, just talking to people and seeing people. And even just on that end, the sort of prizes just like motivates me, and motivates all of us. And yeah, like it's very validating being at events. Like people say nice things to you. It's like, oh, we are doing good, and these games do mean something to people, and they do like what we're doing. So yeah, it's great to just be back, to be honest.
And fun through into the next point. Obviously, you all work in PR teams of varying sizes. We've talked about the move to remote work as we come out of this, like a kind of a hybrid format is settling kind of across the industry and across the country, as it were. Like, how are you finding coordinating with your teams? Some of them, part remote, full remote. Even PCGamesN, we've got team leaders who are managing remote teams. We've got teams in the office when their managers remote, that kind of thing. So if you could, Ryan, if you want to kick us off, how have you found coordinating PR campaigns and coordinating the planning and things, kind of as we come into this post-pandemic age?
Yeah, so it's really interesting for us, because obviously, as I said, when I started, I was fully remote, and that took a lot of work to work out how that, I think ultimately it was a good thing, but it took a lot of work to work out how that is. Currently, we are actually, so for us, again, we're quite a small team. There's only 30 people in the whole company, and half of them are in the shipping team. But we are in the office like 3 days a week, and then spend Monday, Friday at home working remotely. And that balance for us works out perfectly, because it's like, okay, the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we can have all the in-office communications and all that sort of stuff. Monday, Friday, we could do just like, okay, emails, admin, all those like PR stuff like that is easy to just do remotely. But yeah, I see a full, remote working, like, if we was going to hire someone, they said, oh, I'm not comfortable coming in and want to work remotely, that's completely fine. And it has to be nowadays. And we are already set up for that to work. We had to do it for almost 2 years. But yeah, I think we found our footing with it for sure now. I think everyone's had to set up themselves on some sort of, we have Slack now. We weren't using Slack before. Maybe we should have. Or some other sort of, some people use Microsoft Teams or whatever, and we're using Discord a lot more. So yeah, just finding those tools that kind of work on a remote basis, which to be honest have been sort of positive even beyond that sort of COVID and lockdown and remote work necessity. Like, now we have a much better connection with our developers because they're on our Slack channels. They're just there, and we can have daily communications with them, and they can send us gifts of their game. We can go, great, that's looking good. Just a lot more casual sort of conversation with them. And we didn't have that sort of channels beforehand. I mean, we've only recently been doing digital publishing, but even with our physical partners, it was just emails. It was just emails, and if we saw them at physical events. But now it's like, okay, we have this extra arm to our work that we didn't have before, simply that we found through necessity. So yeah, that's really interesting. I think we're probably stronger. We're probably stronger at the moment for it, really.
How about you, Jasmine? You mentioned you love working from home. How's the rest of your team adapting to this hybrid life?
I have a team where only one person likes to go into the office, and the others are like, yay, working from home. But at the moment at Sega, it's still on a voluntary basis to go to work. So people can come in a couple of days a week if they want to, but there's still a limit, sort of, how many people can come in. I think over the pandemic, what I really had to get used to was the amount of meetings, where I had like maybe 5 to 10 meetings a week. I now had like sometimes 5 a day, because normally you would just like be like, hey, can you just have a quick look at this? Or, oh, what do you think of this? Just next to your colleagues. And now you have to have a meeting about every single thing. And especially with PR campaign planning, I don't know if you guys had that as well, but you need to have longer meetings, like 2-hour meetings, to go through a campaign and plan. And what are we doing here? What are we doing for digital events? So there's a lot of planning that now it's been done online, which is fine, but sometimes been difficult managing time with all the meetings and then also getting to do your job. So that I really had to get used to and try to block out stuff in my calendar and stuff. So I got much better at it now, definitely. But I do really miss the social interaction, I think, the most from, we have an amazing team, the marketing team and comms team, and everyone's very supportive. And we try to keep that going via Teams chats and daily catch-ups on Teams, Microsoft Teams. And that was really nice, just to see how everyone's doing. It was barely talking about work. It's just always like, oh, what do you got to moan about today? Yeah. So that was the pandemic for the comms team for us.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like the multi-channel approach that we have to conversations now, whether it's within my team or across marketing, across the company, and then you know, like Ryan said, you know, we talk to our devs on multiple channels as well. Some of them use Discord, some of them use Skype and what have you. So it's having to sort of juggle those multi-channels of communication. Also, working remotely has meant that you've got to learn good meeting etiquette as well. And if anything, it's really promoted the need for that. You know, setting an agenda at a a 30, 45-minute meeting, so you don't meander all over the place. And then you've got 5 minutes to go, and then you're like, oh, you know, God, we haven't spoken about what we're actually here to talk about. So, you know, you've got to overcome that. You've got to promote really good meeting etiquette. And sometimes, you know, you've got to go into the office and you know, book out a big meeting room, and you get your comms leads together, and you thrash out that campaign. And the best way to do that is to do it in person. Of course, over 2 years, we've also had to do that remotely as well, and that brings with it a lot of challenges as well. Some people don't particularly like being on camera, for instance, or something like that, even when it's with colleagues. So you've got to be adaptable. You've got to be, juggle those comms channels, and you've got to use the best route to developing and executing a campaign. And sometimes that is by being in the office for half a day and thrashing out a campaign.
It's funny, Jasmine, you mentioned a lot more meetings now. We try and do no meeting Wednesday, but it hasn't worked so far.
We have that on Friday.
Yeah.
I still have meetings on Friday.
There are meetings about not having meetings.
Yeah. So we've spoken a lot about how your jobs have changed and adapted post-pandemic, but let's take a moment to talk about this perspective from the dev side of things. So we've got many devs in the audience and those watching. What can they expect from PR post-pandemic? Because you've talked about how some of your processes have changed, how your planning have changed. Like for devs looking to get PR representation or PR help, how are those expectations now different now as opposed to maybe before the pandemic? Jon, we'll come to you.
I don't know whether they have changed, to be honest with you. Ultimately, you know, as PRs, we want to make sure that the games we work on have maximum visibility across media. Of course we do. Devs have those expectations as well. That for me certainly hasn't changed in any case. I think where it's not really a challenge, but where it has proven interesting over the last couple of years is what we touched upon earlier on, which is events. You know, you would have a review event where you'd get 50 press, perhaps from across Europe, bring in some from across the US or what have you, or separate international events. Can't do that in the middle of a pandemic. You can't, you know, hire out a really cool venue and you know, do all that sort of stuff. So it's managing those expectations as well, because some of the really cool stuff we could have done over the last couple of years, we just haven't been able to do because of the pandemic. And launch events, review events, preview events, they're really, really important. So managing and tempering developer expectations around those sorts of beats have been interesting to do.
How about you, Jasmine?
I think from a dev's perspective, from what I've heard here and there from the devs and working on games where I'm basically doing that right now, is that I think the one thing they're maybe struggling a little bit with is when you're at a physical event, you can see what the audience is playing or what the journalists are playing. You can be on hand, like really easy, and give them tips and be like, oh, yeah, no, that's just a bug. That's not supposed to happen, you know? Or maybe help them out if they're stuck. And now with digital events, I feel like that's been taken away a bit, that personal touch that you can give as a dev and make it like an even better experience for the journalist or for the consumer at an event is now slightly more difficult. Of course, on Discord, you can share your screen, but only one at the same time. So it is more difficult in that way. So I think that's probably the difference for the devs, but in the end of the day, you want to make sure that the journalist has the opportunity to play your game. And if that works on a digital event, and you can have way more people at your event, because we've seen that, like people from Asia that we usually wouldn't be able to invite because of it would be too far to fly, or it would be maybe too much to go all the way to London or Europe. And now they can join our digital event and they can be part of this whole thing that they normally wouldn't be invited to, because for them it might not be worth the travel. So I think it has also opened up a lot of opportunities in seeing a lot more different people as well, from like China and Australia and New Zealand and other territories. So there's definitely also positives.
How about you, Ryan?
Yeah, so again, for us, like we only launched our digital publisher during the pandemic anyway. Before it was just all the physical games. And for us, it was, for us, it just seems like just an increased sort of visibility and transparency with developers now, just through the nature of us having to be on those platforms, which I'm sure other companies may have already been, but we didn't need to be. So now that we're using Slack and we have all our developers on there, or they're on Discord and stuff, it's just literally a daily communication with those developers. It doesn't matter if a game is a year away, 2 years away. I'm talking to them every single day, really. And sometimes that's about important stuff, and sometimes we need to arrange meetings and calls, but sometimes that's just, how are you doing? What did you eat? Show me a picture of your dog. Or show me, and they'll just post GIFs and we'll send them off to sort of our partners. And yeah, for us, it's just sort of the fact that we had to use those platforms based on the pandemic has meant that we are just, I feel that we are just like a lot more communicative on a day-to-day basis with those partners. Obviously, there's negatives in the fact that we couldn't go to events and couldn't show off that, all their games and stuff to people as well. But yeah, it definitely has, I think it's just sort of opened people up a little bit because you've had to. Yeah.
Sticking with you, Ryan, we've talked about how relationship with devs has changed, and sticking with the kind of the dev and PR perspective just for a moment more. What can devs do to help you as PR and all of you as PR in terms of how they can adapt their communication or their thinking or kind of whatever you feel might be useful in this kind of new age you're in now in terms of how PR has changed?
Yeah, so just have us be involved in the process. Like, we aren't your boss, we're your partners, and so it's, if you're going to share like I've been working on this today with the rest of your team, we want to see that as well, because we're fans of the work. That's why we signed it. I want to see it, even if it has no sort of work-based sort of advantages. If you're like, I did this cool gun thing recently, isn't this funny? I'm not sure whether it's going to go in the game. I'd love to see that. Show us a little GIF. Yeah, just to consider like your publishing partners as part of the team, which I think most developers do anyway, and just share everything you're working on. Like, I want to see all your concept art and everything. And especially as a company, we're very preservation based, so that's sort of the core of our company. So when I see stuff like that, I'm like, please keep a hold of that, or I'll keep a hold of that. Whether it's concept art or sort of early builds, I'm just like, okay, store that all away somewhere. That has to be kept and preserved somehow. Yeah, but we are finding that. We found that with our partners, that that is naturally sort of happening with everyone we're working with, the sort of day-to-day flow and sort of talking about the game and sharing bits and bobs, and that goes back as well. I mean, we'll share what we're doing and where the events are at, whether the game is involved or not. Just that high level of communication, really.
How about you, Jasmine?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you're saying. I think being involved from the very start on the dev side, like letting us know, the comms team or the wider marketing from the very start, when do you expect things to be ready for? Like, when do you think we can plan for events? And yeah, just being part of the process from the very start and being able to get that insight on new features and, how we can use this to pitch it to press and why is this interesting to see at an event. I think that's all really useful information for us, because then we can build a plan and ideas as well, and come up with ideas for cool content, and particularly like with certain press, you want to see what's interesting for them as well. So if you get an early look at what's all available, that's really helpful for us as a comms team from a planning perspective.
The more information you can get from devs as early as possible, the better off you are. Developers are obviously their game's biggest evangelists, right? They want to talk, but they want to share all the information. And I think if you work in PR and comms, one of the roles you've got to be able to do is explain, okay, well, this is a story for press. This is something your community is going to enjoy. It might not sort of resonate with press, so be prepared that actually we're going to go over to social media community channels instead. It's getting influencers involved nice and early as well. Identifying the sorts of people who have already enjoyed games of that genre, for instance. Finding out what works for them as well. They will know. The sort of influences and media that they consume as well. So helping them sort of facilitate that, and yeah, I think that for me is one of the things that's quite important. But yeah, the more information that people can share as soon as possible allows us to really develop and hone a strong comms campaign, whether that's, as I said, PR or any other Marcoms channels, really.
I think one thing that hasn't quite played itself out yet is obviously many games have been delayed during the pandemic. This next couple of months is looking drier perhaps for releases than it would be typically during any kind of normal period. From a PR perspective, and Jasmine, we'll start with you. Do you anticipate kind of PR planning or PR campaigns lasting longer or starting later or anything like that, especially in terms of how release dates just seem to be shifting and dev cycles seem to be needing to resettle themselves after what's been a very disruptive period?
Yeah, all our PR campaigns have shifted. That's just what it was. Like the way we planned for things in 2020, those PR campaigns don't look the same now because everyone started working from home, and the end of the day, the publisher and the game and the studio want to make sure that you release the best possible game you can make. So if that means that you need a couple more months or longer, that's what we will do. And we've seen a couple of our titles been moved back. 2 Point Campus we announced on Wednesday. It's moving to August from May. So you need to be very flexible because we don't make the decision on the PR side if a game needs to be delayed, right? That's the studio, that's other stakeholders. So we just need to be very flexible and adaptable and be like, look, what do we have? Okay, it's moving. What content do we have? Can we extend it? Do we need to come up with new content plans? How are we going to approach it? So yeah, we've mixed up our PR campaigns for pretty much all our titles that are currently running and have recently released frequently, just because, we want to make the best game possible. So if that means you need a couple more months, like I said, you have to adjust on the PR side as well.
Ryan, how about you?
Same here, really. It's just, when we even speak with developers, even from the first point of contact, really, it's just putting a lot of that flexibility and leeway now into when that's going to launch, specific marketing beats. We've even had, release dates where it's quite late notice, really, when we decide when that's going to be, just because everything's so all over the place with events and other games, of course. Other games are in that exact same situation, so they're having to sort of land at random times. We can't potentially plan around them, perhaps as easily as before. Just the same as Jasmine said, really. It's just adding in a lot of that flexibility to things.
Flexibility, but also making sure try and build in redundancies into your campaign as well. If something doesn't work and it's a big hook, and it's coming up, if the physical event drops out or it gets cancelled, something like, okay, what are we going to do now? How best can we maximize this beat? So be flexible, build in redundancies into your campaign.
It's proven to be a very flexible and dynamic period, it feels. We're going to take a moment now. Are there any questions from the audience? Anyone like to jump in with a question? Anyone? No, it's right.
Boom! Two went straight up at the same time. My God, in sync.
Done.
That was amazing.
Do you first, just because you're closer to the mic. Congratulations.
Obviously, you've spoken very much from a perspective of in-house PR team and working with the developers. And if you do have agencies, how have you found the working relationship with them? Been through the pandemic and had to adapt or anything big changes?
Cool. So for the stream, the question was, how has relationships with agencies changed? Because obviously agencies are sometimes brought in to help with PR campaigns. Ryan, we'll start with you. Have you used many agencies? Have your relations with them changed in this post-pandemic?
Yeah, so we're working with an agency at the moment for one of our next releases, and it just is, I think it's a very mutual understanding of the fact that they're going to get information a bit later than they usually would. They understand that, and it just means that some decisions might get made a bit later, especially in regards to events, and again, like release date announcement times and stuff. But it sort of goes back to what we were just saying before. It's just about being communicative, like just, even if I have no new information to share with them, at least telling them that. Like, I'm so sorry, there's no update. Here's when the update might be. And yeah, it's more or less the same, really, as just treating them as in-house. Like, it's just about daily communication, whether that's over Slack or Discord or anything like that, or even if it is just email. Yeah, I wouldn't say, personally, I wouldn't say that the situation is vastly different than working with someone in-house.
Jasmine, how about you?
I think I would say that we go back to the flexibility because especially working with events agencies, digital events agencies, they had to be very patient because we've had a couple of our games move and then you plan for a certain date, but then that event needs to move with it, so they need to move with us. So then again, the flexibility comes back. So it's been a very good process. They're totally understandable. Like, it's out of our control as well. So yeah, I think working with the agencies, they've definitely helped us put up good digital events, I think. So they've been very helpful.
On the occasions we've used agencies, it's not as if in the before times they were sat in the desks next to us. So, there was already that sort of remote relationship in any case. But again, it just comes down to the flexibility, being open and being communicative with your agencies as and when, really. Cool.
Was there a second question? Yeah, the same question. Excellent, well done. Well, we can start bringing this panel to a close then. One thing I'd love to get you folks' take on is, obviously, you know what it was like in the before times, you know the challenges of the times, and now we're in this kind of post-pandemic times. I get the impression that you're all very happy that physical events are back, but are you able to give some kind of sort of judgment, I guess, on anything you don't really care if comebacks or not, or anything that you hope continues to kind of change and evolve and grow? I think it's a very interesting thing. You mentioned, Jasmine, about the increased global nature of access campaigns and stuff like that. You can now reach people in ways that you couldn't before. So I imagine that might be a positive. But we'll start with you, Jon. What is your verdict on PR now?
I think PR as a discipline has managed extraordinarily well over the last couple of years. And I think where we've had to adapt very, very quickly across in all manner of ways over the last couple of years, puts us in good stead to come out stronger in the pandemic. We've had to be much more flexible in our campaigns than we probably were before. We've had to adapt to be more open-minded about how to get around issues like we can't handle hold physical events anymore. So how else can we do it? Things like that, really. I think PR's in a very good place. I think the channels that we have to communicate to audiences have opened up more and more over the last couple of years. And when I say PR, I do mean broader communications as well, because it's not just traditional PR/media relations as well. And a lot of PR units in-house, for instance, will also be responsible for events. I am PR and events lead, for instance. Other places will have a separate events team. Some places will be PR and social media and stuff, and the different channels now. TikTok's exploded the last 2 years. It wasn't a thing in the before times anywhere near to the extent that it is now. So learning the broader channels now. People are using Discord more than ever before. People are streaming on Twitch more and more, and YouTube. And it's about learning how you can maximize the visibility of your campaigns across an even greater amount of channels. And teamwork with your counterparts in other Marcom's disciplines as well. So I think we've all learned how to do that a lot better over the last couple of years, and I think it's provided a new baseline for PR and communications in the years ahead.
How about you, Jasmine?
I agree with everything you're saying. I think one positive note maybe on anyone who wants to work in PR is also, I think a great thing is that this whole remote working thing or hybrid working solutions, I think has opened up a lot of opportunities as well, where you don't necessarily have to live in London or London area or the areas where the publishers are or the studios are. Now you can potentially work from home or partly work from home and maybe get that job now that you would not have gotten pre-pandemic that you maybe can get now because you don't have to travel all that way. So I think that's a positive note. For me personally, I said I love working from home, so yeah, don't bring back 5-day work week in the office. That would be my point.
Yeah, and I love that we're using the before times now. I love that that's now a term. But yeah, sort of echoing similarly, really, it's like studios have to be accepting of remote work now, whether that's part-time, full-time, flexible. And so one problem I've always found in the video games industry is it's very difficult for people to enter it, especially into PR. Like it's been, a lot of jobs will require experience, and it's like, okay, but you all require experience. And so I do think that remote working, I've seen so many people just enter PR recently and like move around all over the place. I feel like on Twitter I'm congratulating someone every day, like, oh, congrats on your new job and moving around. And I do feel like that has opened it up a bit because it isn't London-based now. It is, they are, I think people are looking more into, oh, you sort of run like this online community and you've done this with your content creation and you've done, you've got experience that isn't necessarily a job in the industry, but related to it and sort of fits in. I think that's great, and I think that's a good change, and hopefully that sticks. And yeah, and I hope we have more physical events, because I miss them, and I miss people. But yeah, we have adapted digitally as well, so best of both worlds. Nice little hybrid.
Excellent. Well, Jon, Jasmine, Ryan, thank you very much. PR is in a very solid 8 out of 10 space, I feel. So that's the end of this panel. Thank you, everyone, for watching, both in the theatre and online. Our next panel is at 4 p.m. and it is how to get into games journalism. So if anyone's interested in that, please do either come back or stick around. So thank you very much, everyone, and a round of applause for our panelists.
Thank you.